contradictory?
It's contradictory. Talk about that. So we're here at the end of chapter 7.
So it's just the way that he's writing it is nothing was more natural, and then he's really meaning it really is unnatural, right? It's just kind of going. I don't know, really. This whole book really confused me. Reading this again,
it's very confusing prose.
I
isn't
even
it? Yes.
wrote like in my in here like what?
What?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you said, it was really long, and
Yes,
I think
yes.
that's like really important because it's like she basically was just saying like I saw something across the lake,
Yes.
but she took like almost a whole page to explain like her thoughts and how it almost seems like her thoughts were racing, and we can see that.
Yes.
in her
Yes.
writing.
Yes, that's great. She knew as she was looking at her knitting that there was another presence there. There was no ambiguity about it. She knew it was there. She knew that it shouldn't be there. She thought, well, it probably could be just the gardener. It could be just the chauffeur or whoever. They don't have a chauffeur, whatever they have, like one of the people. But it's not.
Nah, it like reminds me of like those movies where you can see a main character being watched almost.
Yes.
But you're not really there. I
Yes.
feel like we're that person in a way. If that makes sense. I'm not saying that like she knows that we're reading about her or something like that, but I'm just saying like it's just there as in we're watching from a distance.
Okay, so I was going to give you a reading of this paragraph, but Zeke just gave us a better reading. So do you see what Zeke did? He suggested that we are the voyeuristic ghost. There's a way to read this paragraph and do a whole paper on this one paragraph by saying that notice how her certainty of retelling the story puts us in the position of the ghost who's not supposed to be there. It's an unnatural scene for us to be looking on to this and that we're looking in. That's great. I like that very much. I think that there's another reading in Megan's point of view, like the very length of telling us all of this creates the space for saying that the governess is playing hard with the narrative in the same way that Flora is playing hard in her imagination. And so you can sort of see how you can build up these readings, right? That they're there, but they have nothing to do with again, truth. They have to do with meaning, which is a different level. The one I was going to say to you is, and it's very interesting to me, that she talks about there under the shade, and there's this sunlight coming down, and it creates this dappled effect all around, right? It's almost as though, do you know what it's like when you're like, because she says that was suffused, like, do you know what it's like when, it's hard to think of the summer now, right? But like in this summer, because they're in the summer now, where light comes through the branches or the leaves at certain angles and creates kind of patterns on the ground, right? So she has these patterns on the ground, a pattern of light and dark, that sort of come through, and then she has her stitching, which she's looking at, which has a pattern of cross kind of pattern, very similar, where light can come through the stitching, right? As you're stitching, you can see light coming through, and it's almost like she's dealing with natural and unnatural elements, she's stitching together a story that is also, because she calls it work. I sat down I had work to do. So she sits down and she begins to knit a story for us, where she plays with these natural and unnatural elements, maybe the natural are the verticals and the unnaturals are the horizontals, right? And then she creates already a story before she looks at it. Before she sees the ghost, she knows she's going to see the ghost. So that would be another story, right? So it's a kind of way to think about these stitchings. The only thing I want to point to in the next paragraph is one of James's vulgar jokes, and it shows how the governess is trying to figure out figure something out, or she's involved. Flora turns her back to the ghost. And do you remember what she did then?
So she would make a little boat out of the bark.
Yes, but how does she make a boat out of the bark?
Sticks. That's what I got on it. If there was like a.
She picks up a sort of flat piece of wood that has a hole in it. She picks up a straight piece of branch, and she sticks the branch through the hole, which is of course a metaphor for intercourse.
Oh.
She turns her back to the thing, and then she recreates. I don't think that Flora is thinking this, because I'm one of those people that sort of thinks that the governess is kind of, she's just overwrought, right? But at the very moment when the unnatural thing is happening, and it's unnatural for these people to be, because let's just face it, servants probably had sex all the time. Why wouldn't they? Good for them. Have as much as you want. You're working really hard. Just go ahead and do it. What's the problem? There's nobody. No one's getting hurt, right? But I'm sorry to show my point of view, but it's unnatural for her, right? And so she creates this whole, just like Miles saying a bad word. He knew something. Oh no, he learned something bad, right? So that hysteria, I think, that's what I just wanted to point at, that little part there. And James likes these jokes. I told you before, the jokes in Portrait of a Lady, they're there. Mr. Goodwood is the man she doesn't want to marry, Okay, let's keep going. Let's go to, does anyone have anything else to say about this section? This is the second or third appearance, because she begins to count them herself. This is the third, isn't it? Is it the second? Second. Okay, all right. I want to go to chapter 10. So I'm interested in chapter 10, right towards the beginning, right after she sees Quint on the stairs. This is where she sees him. Yes, okay. Or is it this where she sees Jessel? No, this is where she sees Quint. If you remember what happens, this is where she goes out and... No, she did. This isn't. She just hears a sound. Is that what happens? She's getting up. I want to point out two things before getting to this. If you look on our page, it's in chapter 9 on our page 66. She's sleeping in the same room with Flora, is what she does. She says, again, this question that she only says it sometimes, I remember, at the bottom of page 66, I remember that the book I had in my hands was Fielding's Amelia. Now, by the way, Fielding was an 18th century novelist. All of these 18th century novelists wrote the same novel over and over and over again. Richardson, Fielding, all of them. Actually, yes. And what happened in almost all these stories is someone was trying to marry off a girl to someone she didn't want to be married to. And the plot was like, how is she going to escape this situation? So, girl whose virginity or virtue is in danger. So she's in this thing of danger. She's reading a plot of sexual danger. And then she gets the idea that somebody is right outside her room. Chapter 10. I'm not going to read the whole section, but I want to look at the top of page 69. this is where I think that this book gets really, really twisted. She comes back, and then she sees Flora, and Flora says to her, "You naughty, where have you been?" And this freaks out the governess. And so the governess, instead of saying, "Excuse me, why are you talking to me like that? That's not okay," right? Which is what she says she want. I think the language that he uses, like, instead of challenging her own irregularity, right? That's an irregular way to talk to a grown-up. I found myself arraigned, right? That means that's when you're charged with something, right? Like in the court, you're arraigned, right? So she found herself feeling guilty all of a sudden, and explaining. Well, I went out because I heard something outside, and like whatever. It's so weird. Why does she feel guilty? Yes.
I think she kind of enjoys seeing the ghost because it makes her feel like she has a purpose and like a job, kind of like in a heroic sense.
Yes. She's going to save the virtue of the children. Right? She's going to save them, and she will subject herself to as much degradation and sexual weirdness as she needs to stand in front of those children and save them. Right? She says this to Gross, right? She's like, "I don't care how far I have to go. I'll stand between them and the sexual weirdness, and I'll protect them from it." I think she does, and I think then Flora catches this up, and she's like, "You naughty, where have you been?" Right? Okay. Can somebody tell me? I could not find it when I was rereading. Or I read it and then I moved on and I didn't mark it. Or maybe I have it in here. Hold on. I'm looking for the kiss, where he kisses her. Because I feel quite certain that Miles kisses her on the mouth.
Yes.
Yes.
Page 75.
Page 75 in ours? Okay.
I thought I got confused.
Oh, I thought it was here. Oh, yeah. This is where he's been standing outside. She looks down. He was waiting out there since midnight. Flora's looking down. She goes to another window. And then she goes and gets him. And then she doesn't yell at him or anything. She just brings him upstairs. She brings him upstairs. He sits there. And she's like, "Okay, let's talk about this. What was going on?" Says, "Well, I wanted you to think me bad." Okay. On 75. "Just in order that you should do this." And she says, "Do what?" "Think me, for a change, bad. I shall never forget the sweetness and gaiety with which he brought out the word, nor how on top of it he bent forward and kissed me. It was practically the end of everything. I met his kiss, and I had to make, while I folded him for a minute in my arms, the most stupendous effort not to cry. He had given exactly the account of himself that permitted least my going behind it, and it was only with the effect of confirming my acceptance of that, as I presently glanced about the room, that I could say, 'Then you did not undress him.'" So what do we make of the kiss, and what do we make of this? This is, again, I just want to say, the way I understand, he gave the account of himself which allowed for me least to go behind it. What she's saying is like, by saying that he wanted to be thought of as bad, it kept her from being able to say, "Aren't you bad?" It's sort of, you know what I mean? It's sort of like my son, who's 17, and sometimes I go in his room and he's gone. And I'm like, I call him on his cell phone. I'm like, "Dude," and he's like, "Okay, I'll be back. I'm sorry." It's like 3 a.m. I'm sorry. Whatever. It's like once he goes, "Yeah, I fucked up. I'm sorry." It's kind of hard to then punish it. Because it's like. Yeah. So what's the kiss? Or did you want to say something more about
I
that?
just want to say it's some badass kids. They're like 10. Like, what's wrong with them? So I'm just very confused as to. I mean, they're kind of mentally like grown though, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It's just like,
That's what I was.
it's just like, how are they 10 years old and they're like acting like.
Well, he's more like 13 or 14, I think. But yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She's 10, I think. No, she's 8 and he's 10.
Yeah.
That's what I. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm
Okay.
just
10.
like, hold on.
I think the main reason it's in the novel is to help contribute to the theme of the governess trying to protect these children
Mhm.
from sexuality, but these children already having like innate sexuality about them, like
Yes.
you said, like talking
Yes.
about like relating it to Freud, and like
Yes.
how these children have innate like sexual tendencies,
Yes.
but she's also like uselessly or helplessly trying to prevent them from being exposed to sexuality.
Yes.
And then I'd also want to add that sometimes trauma can lead to kids growing up
Oh
faster.
yeah.
Yeah, they did lose both their parents.
Yeah, they lost their
That's what I was
parents, and they were
thinking.
kind of like, the uncle, I don't think was like not there for them, but also not
He's
there.
straight up,
Yeah, the uncle's
Yeah.
not there for them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not there now. Yeah, but before before she came.
I will say
Yeah.
that by 19th century standards, the uncle is a stand-up guy, but by our standards today, no.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh yeah. They would have just gone into like some kind of. He would not have had them at all. Yeah.
Wasn't there a part where the governess suggested that like Quint might have been like doing things to the boy or something like that?
I think that the way I understand that section is that Quint exposes the boy
Oh.
to things that he shouldn't be exposed to. I didn't really think that there was a kind of, but I mean, inside the governess's mind, who knows? Maybe.
Like maybe so when you cross the birth of a child and then they repeat it, or maybe he said something like he was kind of involved with the
Right.
other governess, right?
Right.
So what if he would say like inappropriate things about her in front of?
Yeah, I think it's something like that. And also, they were supposed to have taken care of the kids together, so maybe they witnessed something. This is the great trauma of Victorian life, is that you may actually witness a sexuality and then be, scarred for life,
And then he would, like,
trying to figure it out for the rest of your life. Even after you've done it, you're still like, well, it's not the same. Something was happening with my parents. Yes. Go on.
So like later in the book, when like the very end of the book where he's explaining why he got kicked out or
Mhm.
something like that,
Mhm.
he just said things to boys that he liked, and then they repeated the same thing to other boys they liked.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if maybe it's like the sexuality thing. Maybe he was he had homosexual tendencies, or maybe he was like exploring that, or he was just saying things like pointing out, hey, maybe that's a hot teacher. If it was a female teacher, and other guys were like, yeah, no, she's hot, and then like I don't know, maybe something like that, and they just didn't like.
It seems to me like the worry is, and I think there's some possibility that this is what happened, that he learned all kinds of. I mean, I had this experience, in fact. Like I had I was exposed to too much stuff from older people early on, and it was really terrifying, actually, to tell you the truth. I mean, I thought it was cool at the time, but now looking back on it, I'm like, oh my God, like, what were they thinking? Like, these were like people kind of over. Here's my family, and they were kind of halfway part of my family, and and it was terrifying. But what I want to say about the boys that he likes, I think that the much simpler explanation to this is to think about what it means to be that age and to want the approval of other boys. I really think that's a much clearer example, since it does seem that he actually is worried about his growing fantasies about the governess. When he's walking with her to church, it's sort of like he's saying, "This is really not natural. Like I should probably not be here. Like I'm just sort of like I'm sort of in this space where I'm just kind of like he has to explain things to her, like I should probably be back at school with the other boys, and not kind of like, here languishing, not learning anything, but also kind of like, kissing you and like." having you walk around me all the time and like whatever. I don't know. That's what maybe that's my own.
So like it was a legit, he like legit kissed her, or was it just like an innocent
Well,
kiss on the cheek?
okay, I'm not the only one who interpreted this way because the movie version from the 1950s with Deborah Kerr is a full-on kiss. It's a full-on kiss.
That's what I was thinking. Thought.
So like, faces, lip plant, boom,
Bam.
and
I would
and
be like, ooh.
right. And it's almost like had he been 5 years younger, no problem. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
There's this Pink Floyd song. I don't know what it's called, but it's like from the perspective of the child, and like the mother is overbearing, like can't date anybody because she doesn't approve of anybody. But it's like a weird like.
It's not like In the Wall or something like that.
It's like some sort of like weird like sexual thing almost though, and so but I think like here like the governess like sees Miles as like this like cherub angel baby, and he's like a teenager or a preteen, and I'm just wondering like, is she like her babying him is kind of like sexualizing him in a way, like the ownership of it.
I think he is. I think to use a term in a very literal way, he becomes a fetish for her.
Yeah.
He is a fetish for the uncle. Like he stands in for the uncle, but not in a directly sexual way. I don't think she has any like untoward feelings. I think it's her own sexuality that she has a hard time coming to grips with, and that's what she then projects out onto the children so much, and back onto Jessel and Quint. Whether or not they really, come back to, to destroy the innocence of the children, I don't. The point is that for her, it's a very, very serious situation. So let's just go to the very end, and then we're gonna. I'm gonna say some. I'm gonna try to help you before the readings by saying some things about new criticism. Okay. Okay. So I'm on chapter 24, the final chapter, and I'm gonna skip over the section where he finally confesses. Yes.
This is just like on the last part.
The last part. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, about the
Yeah.
but he says like think of me first, which is bad, and then he kisses her, which like
Yes.
could be a bad thing. So
Yes.
it's like because she sees him as like this perfect little angel or whatever.
Yes.
He's like I'm not. Like it's his way of proving it.
I also think he wants to get the hell out. Let me do something bad so you will send me off to school. Because I'm really tired. I'm really kind of bored of playing this stuff, and I want to get back to like roughhousing and whatever with the boys and talking, smack with the boys and doing all that stuff. And so I think you're right. He wants her to think him bad. He's trying to be shocking, and he's also trying to like get out of the situation. He wants to be back at school. All right, so let's look at the very ending. So I'm on page 120 of our edition, and I'm just going to go from she shouts, "No more, no more, no more." I shrieked to my visitant as I tried to press him against me. Miles against me. "Is she here?" Miles panted as he caught with his sealed eyes the direction of my words. Then, as his strange she staggered me, with a gasp I echoed, "Miss Jessel, Miss Jessel." He, with a sudden fury, seized me back. I seized, stupefied, his supposition, some sequel to what we had done to Flora. But this made me only want to show him that it was better still than that. "It's not Miss Jessel, but it's at the window, straight before us. It's there." The coward horror, there for the last time. At this, after a second in which his head made a movement of a baffled dog's on a scent, and then gave a frantic little shake of air for light, he was at me with a white rage, bewildered, glaring vainly all over the place, and missing wholly, though it now, to my sense, filled the room like the taste of poison, the wide, overwhelming presence. "It's he?" I was so determined to have all my proof, that I flashed into ice to challenge him. Whom do you mean by he? Peter Quint, you devil. His face gave again around the room a convulsed supplication. Where? They are in my ears still, his serene surrender of the name and his tribute to my devotion. What does he matter now, my own? What will he ever matter? I have you. I launched at the beast, but he has lost you forever. Then, for the demonstration of my work, there, I said to Miles, but he already jerked straight around, stared, glared again, and seen but the quiet day. With the stroke of the loss I was so proud of the loss I was so proud of, he uttered the cry of a creature hurled over an abyss, and the grasp with which I recovered him might have been that of catching him in his fall. I caught him, yes, I held him. It may be imagined with what a passion. But at the end of a minute I began to feel what it truly was that I held. We were alone with the quiet day, and his little heart, dispossessed, had stopped. Some last thoughts about the ending. Yes?
So if there wasn't a ghost there, she must have scared him so bad, like by trying to point out something that's not normal, like paranormal.
Right.
That it scared him to death.
Yeah.
But if there was a ghost there, it scared him either way.
Throughout reading most of this, I didn't have any sort of like anger feelings toward the mistress, but for some reason reading this last page had made me angry at her. That while at one point I was believing that there could have been a ghost here, for some reason my brain went, no, she's the one who's just out of stress, out of her mind, and has done something absolutely crazy and has hurt this child. I don't know what made me change from one case to another one so quickly, but it was just something I was like, she had said, I think in one of I can't remember which page it was on, that she had a tendency to hug the children strongly or hug them often or something like that, and I think maybe thinking of that and then reading this had my mind thinking that she had done something close to that, like over embraced or something. Along
Smothered
with,
him, like literally smothered him.
Yeah.
That's the other. Some people think that like she actually like held him so tightly or pressed his face against her or what. Or he's looking around, he's jerking around, so maybe she's got him in a stranglehold.
Yeah.
I don't know what, but. Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that in the perspective of, say, the ghosts are real and everything, I think that like the boy, he was more scared that not just that it was a ghost, but that it was Peter Quint himself, because like he didn't want to see him again. I think, and I think that's what probably would like scared him to death, because he didn't want to have to see him again, and then have him back in his life. Kind of because he was like a bad influence on him, like earlier. I think they said.
Mrs. Gross suggested that that Peter Quint was a bad influence, that he was too free with everybody, that he went, you can imagine, he didn't respect, from a class perspective, he didn't respect his class position. He went and got the master's clothes and put them on when he was going out. He mixed with the other servants in front of everyone. He, according to her, it wasn't just Miss Jessel that maybe he had relations with, it was other people in the house. So he was a scoundrel, right?
Did you call him a hound?
What?
Did you call him a hound?
Well, that's interesting because at the end, Miles becomes like a dog.
What do you mean by that?
It says in the text at the very end that he sniffed around like a dog.
Oh, okay.
I just read it. That's the only reason I remember it. So I think I want to hold open the ambiguity of the ending. We're going to definitely return to this as we sort of move through the class and try different interpretations, different methods of interpretation. But I sort of want to jump ahead to your readings for next time. You're going to be reading Clenth Brooks and Wimsatt, W something Wimsatt. these are both two major awesome scholars of literary criticism. I think that you're going to really love the writing, but I want to say a few things about what new criticism is before we get to those essays, okay? So I asked you to read some pages, but basically, let me just walk my way through this idea of new criticism. All right, so these are just very quick, down and dirty sort of ideas that I have about this. So the new critics, I think roughly the time period that we're talking about is from the 1930s to the 1960s. But I think really the main point of their sort of hegemony, or like the point when they were strongest, is in the 1950s. And this whole phenomena is really promulgated in the U.S. and in a similar sense in England by the end of the World War II and the GI Bill. Does anybody know what the GI Bill was? Historians amongst us? No? The GI Bill was where when people came back from World War II, the government started a policy to give money to returning soldiers to go to college. So these were a massive influx of first-generation college students and a huge boom in the university system. So it is in the late 1940s and 1950s that in places like where I come from, California, the UC system explodes, and with it the state college system explodes. Same thing in New York. The City College of New York system, the CUNY system, and the SUNY system, the state university system, explode and get really big, and you get all these regional new campuses opening up. That's how, I mean, you had Berkeley and you had UCLA and UCSD, but that's how you get UC Riverside, UC, and same thing in New York, all this explosion. So what was it that they were doing in English, in the English field of English? Well, your book tells you that before we were doing this kind of close analysis, we were mostly talking about how much we liked books, we were talking about the authors, we were making arguments about who's better, is Tennyson or Browning the better 19th century Victorian poet. We were doing things like that. When new criticism comes along, it takes tools that were originally used in German philology, and that means close textual analysis of the Bible, to do analysis of literary texts. So it's pretty cool, right? It's a shifting from that kind of intense close focus on the text from what had been done in strictly for biblical scholarship, then became something we did with Shakespeare, Milton, Donne, Keats, Wordsworth, Byron, then increasingly Eliot, other people like this, okay? So it involves close reading, which you probably already are familiar with, just sort of where you pay real close attention to the text. And it includes then all of these different, what I would call them, attributes or tones in the work. They can't, again, remember, we're dealing with meaning, not necessarily intellect. So what ambiguity means is up for grabs. I mean, you could say it's really a shitty, excuse me, not language, it's really a crappy book because I don't understand the ending. What happened? You find people that walk out of movies like that. I'm usually right behind them. After I've seen a movie like that, it's like, I either if you don't want to talk about the movie, don't talk to me. If you want to talk about the movie, we'll go get coffee and talk for a long time. You don't want to talk about the movie, give me a little while to just process it. Because I'm usually, if I like it, I'm like, right? So and I'm always behind somebody that goes, that was stupid. I didn't understand what happened. What was that all about? I'm like, right? So that's what we're dealing with: ambiguity, paradox, irony, and we'll talk more about what irony really is. It is not what Alanis Morissette says it is. It's something else. It's not like it's irony is something else. Okay, tension. All right, these are attributes or tones, right? They add complexity when we begin to think about them, and these new critical writers. They gave us the means to do this. William Empson had a great book called 7 Types of Ambiguity. Really great book, right? Empson is just brilliant. I love him. Several of these scholars from this period. Now you're gonna, if you took this class from someone else, you would get a really dark reading of the New Critics. How they tried to reduce history out of everything and whatever. But for me, you're gonna get a very loving treatment of the New Critics. Why? Because I think what they give us is not really a theory. They don't give us a theory. They give us a method. And I want you to think about the difference between those two things. They give us a method, a way to begin to unpack texts in a way that's really, really, really valuable for the ends of feminist criticism, for the ends of psychoanalyticism, for the ends of post-colonial criticism. You see what I mean? It's a method, a way of reading. And these things that they ask us to focus on, form, right? And again, what you're looking for in form are mostly anomalies. You're looking for places where the did I spell that right? Okay. You're looking for places where there are disruptions in the form. You're also looking for formal shifts and patterns. So they give us this to talk about, right? Your book says that there was a focus on the unity of the text. I want to sort of just say, okay, yes, maybe, but it's always a unity. There's a term, and maybe it comes from Hegel, but I think the term is something like unity in multiplicity. That's the way to think about it. Is not to think about it as a unity like a one, but like a kind of fullness that contains multiples. I don't even know if that makes sense, but that's the way I would think about it. And we'll get more to that. And then finally, this leads to this word being a very important word for literary criticism. An immanent critique is one that comes from the inside. The inside of the text. So you're not applying something to the outside of the text, you're working from the text up. Having said that, I think that like what we're going to see is that the new critics, when you read the essays, they're going to make certain claims about, the text in general. I think we can maybe take what we want of those and leave the rest. But in terms of a method, I want us to understand what they were arguing for in the method. When they say that the work of art the work of art or aesthetic object is a formal unity, what they mean is you don't have to know everything about Keats's life to really understand, enjoy, and unpack a text like Ode on a Grecian Urn, which is one Clent Brooks wrote a famous essay on Ode on the Grecian Urn called The Well-Wrought Urn, right? So for now, yeah. So read the Brooks and read the Wimsatt, and we'll be back on Wednesday to talk about them, and I'll see you then. Oh, and can Miranda and Luke give your information to Zeke? Thanks, guys.